LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight breaks the mold of TT Games' wider LEGO franchise, breathing a new life into a formula that was wearing a little thin by 2022's LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. In this video, we're going to go over what Legacy of the Dark Knight gets right, what it gets wrong, and where the LEGO franchise needs to go next, and most importantly, whether you should play LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. Warning, this review will contain some spoilers. I will though endeavour to keep them to a minimum and as vague as I can. Legacy of the Dark Knight is the 22nd entry into TT Games' iconic LEGO series of video games since it started all the way back in 2005 with LEGO Star Wars the video game, and the latest main entry in the LEGO Batman series since 2014's LEGO Batman 3 Beyond Gotham. With 20 years of LEGO games, they have seen some evolution, but they've also remained remarkably similar. This culminated with the Skywalker Saga, where it all just felt a little too much. LEGO games had grown to the point where the 9-movie saga felt rushed among an overly padded world, and where, with DLC, players had their pick of over 400 different characters, including incredibly obscure background characters and multiple versions of the same character that played identically to close to 50 other characters. My favourite was Han Solo, frozen in carbonite. While not perfect, and not directly tied to TT Games' LEGO franchise, Guerrilla Games' LEGO Horizon Adventures also showed that there was room to do more interesting things with LEGO games, and with that, the stage was set for LEGO Batman to emerge from the shadows and forge a new direction for the franchise. One aspect of this new direction was TT Games abandoning their proprietary NTT engine that had been developed for the Skywalker Saga and adopting the powerful but flawed Unreal Engine 5. The Skywalker Saga's 5-year development was one fraught with issues, and one of the more fundamental issues was the push for the studio to continue development on the unstable NTT engine, despite the issues it was creating for a game whose pre-production had been focused on the previous engine, and the vocal push from employees to switch to Unreal. Following the release of the Skywalker Saga, TT Games quickly pivoted towards Unreal Engine 5 for the development of Legacy of the Dark Knight, and it's a decision that paid off in spades. The rendition of LEGO in Unreal Engine 5 is leaps and bounds ahead of what was previously possible for TT Games with previous engines. The open world of Gotham is incredibly immersive, featuring densely packed islands chock full of particle and lighting effects. A lot of work has clearly been put into accurately representing a LEGO world within the engine, and it makes for a world that feels natural and alive. Models feel intricately detailed, replicating LEGO blocks with flat stickers for detail. Textures are also impressively photoreal, as is the way lighting and rain interact with LEGO pieces. It's as beautifully atmospheric and as cinematic as you would expect for any serious Batman installment. It's certainly ambitious too, with meticulous detail applied to ensuring the most realistic interpretation of LEGO yet, with microscopic imperfections and different types of textures of plastic all contributing to the overall quality. The lighting in particular is a huge aspect of why Legacy of the Dark Knight looks so good. You're never actually going to see those micro scratches and imperfections, but the way the game's lighting interacts with things, you will. The lighting is natural, atmospheric, and impressive, but I think the most interesting aspect of it for me is the impact that it has on the cohesion of the world. More so than any previous LEGO entries, the lighting seamlessly brings together the LEGO elements of the world and the non-LEGO, providing a step up in immersion, where previous titles like the LEGO Skywalker Saga had to some degree felt like LEGO in a realistic environment. Legacy of the Dark Knight feels like a realistic LEGO world. While Unreal Engine 5 brings with it a leap in visual fidelity, it does also bring with it some of its signature performance issues. I always seem to fall onto the lucky side where it comes to bugs and performance issues with games, and for the most part that is also true of Legacy of the Dark Knight. I played in the PS5's quality mode option, and performance was pretty solid, with no noticeable drops in frame rate or performance throughout gameplay sections, including mass destruction of breakables and large combat segments. I did get a rare FPS drop and freeze during some early cutscenes, most noticeably being the freezers during the penguin chase scene recreation.
license and registration, please.
This was by far the most egregious instance, and actually the thing that made me start taking notes and decide to write this review. With it being so noticeable in this scene only, it did make me question if this was maybe an instance of bad editing. But with the scene being the only instance, I'm not convinced it was bad editing, and either way, it just didn't feel right. Where the Unreal Engine also seemed to struggle was with traversal outside of vehicles and with some animations. Traversal with the grappling gun has a lot of its own issues that we'll discuss in more detail shortly, but it was prone to poor pathing and colliding with ledges and other edges in a way that would lock the animation momentarily while whichever character you were playing as was stuck before being able to either continue or cancel out of it. Combat animations also saw similar issues, with animations prone to getting locked when awkwardly interacting with the environment. An extremely common and quite amusing one would be a particular finishing move used on larger brute enemies, where Batman would jump on their back to finish them off and awkwardly kind of just jitter on top of them. Combat in Legacy of the Dark Knight is very strongly inspired by the fluid combat system of Rocksteady's Arkham games. In fact, Rocksteady Studios has been credited as a co-developer for Legacy of the Dark Knight, and though only around 20 or so developers from Rocksteady contributed to the game, their influence is found everywhere, infusing the game with the Arkham DNA. At times, it's easy to see Legacy of the Dark Knight as Arkham Light or Lego Arkham City for how strong that influence is, and where that influence is felt most is with the game's combat and stealth mechanics. The free-flow combat system Rocksteady developed for the Arkham trilogy is rightly hailed as one of the best combat systems within gaming. The rhythm-based system focused on keeping up momentum while freely flowing between basic strikes, counters, and gadgets. It was a system that felt intuitive, responsive, and allowed for a greater range of creativity whilst remaining highly rewarding. Legacy of the Dark Knight's combat is a very watered down version of this system, keeping the core fluidity of the system, but removing a lot of the fun combos that ultimately made it so rewarding. The trinity at the core of the system of basic attacks, counters, and dodges thankfully remains thoroughly satisfying to navigate, but the lack of challenge on even the Dark Knight difficulty setting highlighted how paint by numbers the system is. The lack of difficulty means the game fails to reward you for engaging with the various systems in combat. Basic attacks and counters are more than enough to steamroll any fight. You can, of course, weave gadgets into the flow of combat. Each character has access to 2 gadgets that have distinct uses for puzzles throughout the world and that can be switched between at will. In combat, these gadgets have varying degrees of usefulness, splitting into 2 distinct camps: stuns and traversal. Robin, for example, can use tightrope lines between specific points to get the drop on enemies, while Jim Gordon has a police-issue tactical foam sprayer that can be used to immobilize enemies and doubles as my favourite way to smash up destructibles for stud collection. Batman obviously is the character you will be playing as the most, and he can utilise the iconic Batarang and grapple gun. The Batarang can stagger and stun enemies, and the grapple gun pulls enemies towards you to, well, grapple, and either attack or throw them. In isolation, both of these gadgets were fun to use in combat, particularly the grapple gun, which in some locations would allow you to pull a foe towards you and then throw them off a building to plummet to their death, if you fancied a particularly brutal Batman in your LEGO game. In bigger groups, I found them to be slightly clunkier to use, and ultimately I didn't find that they really made that much impact into the combat, being far more of use as tools to navigate puzzles. I had a similar issue with the stealth, which again tries to capture the essence of Arkham's Predator stealth. It occasionally provided opportunities to perform hit and run attacks on the unsuspecting goons you faced, and while these sections clearly set you up to do a bit of stealth, it never truly felt like a genuine option. These little areas never felt as though they had the room to navigate, and the frustrating grapple system often made escaping undetected riskier than intended. While navigating the rooms could often be mitigated with careful timing and a bit of pre-thought, stealthy navigation was rarely required. When enemy pathing and vision within these sections was conducive to stealth, it felt clear that the room had been set up specifically to give you an easy to pull off stealth moment, and therefore it didn't wholly feel satisfying. When it wasn't, stealth mostly felt like a prelude to combat, allowing you to pick off one or two enemies with takedowns before getting into the fight proper. It was because of this that the stealth felt like an afterthought, included because it's a key association with Batman and the Arkham games, rather than because it was an interesting addition to the LEGO formula. Where the LEGO formula has been altered the most is in the reduction of the character roster to just 7 characters. I think this is ultimately a step in the right direction, away from the bloated character rosters we saw in Skywalker Saga, but it is perhaps a bit of an overcorrection. Though each character has their own pairing of gadgets, they otherwise felt identical mechanically. As previously mentioned in combat, the gadgets are essentially varying stuns or traversal tools, but their impact in combat is lacking. Outside of combat is where each character finds their true use, but even then, outside of a single level, you will always have Batman as one of the 2 playable characters, and swap to any other characters as and when you need their specific ability. Everything that the other characters can do is something that could probably just be done by Batman with a gadget. Combat otherwise is identical between them, especially as I found the gadgets to be clunky and unfun to use, so that other characters often felt like they were just there to justify additional characters and give player 2 something to do. The only true differentiation between any of the characters is their abilities, and outside this, there is often little reason to play as them. The 2 characters I played the most outside of Batman were Jim Gordon and Catwoman, and in part that was because the story missions that required you to play as them were far longer than any others, and because Jim's foam gun and Catwoman's whip were just far more efficient for quickly collecting all the studs in an area, which ironically made them a lot of fun to play. The reduced character roster was definitely a good decision, but I would really like to see TT Games provide characters that genuinely play differently with unique mechanics outside of a specific tool to use in puzzles. I do think LEGO games benefit from having that larger roster of characters for the replay value, and the lack of traditional free play mode for levels letting you come back with different characters to unlock new areas and find all the collectibles and secrets is something I didn't think I would find myself missing until it was gone. There are no secret areas to find by coming back later with a different character, and the collectibles can all be found along the level's path with minimal exploration. I always found levels in LEGO games simultaneously frustrating and super engaging. On the one hand, I always wanted to explore and collect as many secrets and collectibles as possible the first time around. On the other hand, I always found that having to come back in free play with different characters and their abilities to unlock new areas and complete new puzzles in new ways to collect everything, a really compelling way to engage with replaying content that I might otherwise not have found myself interested in doing. In Legacy of the Dark Knight, the collectibles in a level become a checklist to complete along the way, rather than a reward for returning and exploring. If I picked up a collectible and the previous one on the pop-up was not highlighted, I knew I needed to backtrack to go and get it, making the level take longer than needed and sucking out the fun of exploration. The 400 plus characters of the Skywalker Saga was certainly too many. 7 is better, but probably too few. As a side note, there is also disappointingly little variety in the enemies. You have your basic thugs, shield thugs, stun thugs, brutes, ranged thugs, and some themed mini enemies. But there's no difference in the enemies you face for each of the eras or villain associations. Penguin themed thugs are identical to Joker thugs, are identical to League of Shadow thugs, with variations being skins only. It would have been a nice touch for the enemies you face to have some uniqueness to their faction to add just that little bit of variety. Something that's always been quite tied to the vast character roster of LEGO games has been the aforementioned collectibles. Lots and lots and lots of collectibles. And Legacy of the Dark Knight is no different in that regard. As you explore Gotham, there will be plenty of collectibles to find. As previously mentioned, free play is out, so while levels can be repeated, it's only going to be to find the collectibles you missed along the way and not to discover new things. Collectibles are drip-fed through the main story, unlocking different challenges and things to find as you progress and encounter the villains responsible. It's a nice way of pacing them out a little, allowing you to immerse yourself in the story without nursing the inevitable desire to hunt them all down, which you won't be able to do until you have unlocked the full roster of characters near the end of the story anyway. There's no special secret quest chains or puzzles to complete to unlock secret characters or costumes, and the puzzles and collectibles, like everything else in the game, don't particularly pose a challenge. Hitting milestones will unlock new costumes, but otherwise they just aren't that interesting, particularly once you're hundreds in. It's a stark improvement from the collectible bloat of previous games, but the improvement is essentially just a reduction of pure numbers rather than actually making the system interesting. But even with a reduced number of things to do and find, it can still at times be quite overwhelming due to just how tightly packed it is within the dense city, where you will still barely move without stumbling across a new thing to do or receiving a new call for a crime in progress nearby. Navigating a dense Gotham City to get to collectibles is often a bit of a pain in and of itself, particularly when using the grapple at any rate. Using the Batmobile is a huge amount of fun. Each of the different Batmobiles feel different in how they drive, reflecting the design choices for each one. The Tumbler from Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy feels lumbering, heavy and intimidating, whilst the muscle car Batmobile from The Batman feels fast and crisp. My car of choice was the 1966 TV show Batmobile, which felt like a great middle ground. I found endless fun in just driving around, smashing through objects, ramming cars out of the way, and completing racing challenges. Gliding was also a lot of fun, though not quite as fun as the Batmobile. Airstreams throughout the city can be used for traversal and provide you with some extra speed, similar to the system in Spider-Man 2, while gliding between buildings and getting the literal drop on thugs doing crime feels rightly cinematic. The biggest letdown of the traversal system though was the grapple gun. It felt clunky to use, frequently awkward and finicky, with pathing that would get characters stuck. It particularly seems to struggle with grappling to surfaces above you, either struggling to get a lock on or only picking things up from specific heights and angles. It made travelling to collectibles located on the top of tall buildings particularly frustrating, and I found myself having to make multiple attempts to launch myself from various other buildings to try and get the right height and the right angle that would let me get to where I needed to go. Part of the fun of Batman is using the grapple to engage and disengage enemies, to run across rooftops, grapple to high spots, and leap into a glide. But the grapple system was just so unfun to use for traversal and a weak addition to combat alongside stealth that I ended up mostly travelling via Batmobile wherever possible. There is also a fast travel system that you can unlock by completing puzzles, but the Batmobile was way more fun. It's no mean feat attempting to weave 4 decades and massively differing styles of Batman media into something that even vaguely resembles a cohesive narrative. Legacy of the Dark Knight manages to do this with striking ease. As a whole, the narrative is framed through the Batman. As the earliest film tonally within the Batman mythology, it makes sense as both the player and the world are introduced to Batman through this film. We then get elements of the other films worked in places that fit the overall structure. For example, the prologue focuses around Bruce, his parents' death, and his training with the League of Shadows as featured within Batman Begins, before we jump back to the Batman with the iteration of characters from this movie, such as Alfred and Jim Gordon, carrying over into the rest of the game. In order to create a cohesive narrative, this works really well. It's not perfect, but it's probably the best way to incorporate all the films without going down the highlights reel style campaigns that the Skywalker saga featured. That's not to say that some films don't often feel like highlight reels though. The biggest flaw with the story is the pace, which does unfortunately feel quite up and down in places. There's a lot here and it's not always given the same amount of room to breathe and tell its story. The prologue lasts about an hour, and playing through the Batman lasts about an hour and covers a lot of the film's storylines. But towards the latter part of the game, movies like The Dark Knight last around half an hour and mostly just skip to a couple of iconic scenes before moving on. And while this is somewhat disappointing that films don't get more of a focus, overall it works really well. A few scenes are moved around here and there to better fit the overall narrative. For example, the Dark Knight's interrogation of the Joker is more of a part of the Dark Knight Rises campaign, and despite sometimes feeling more rushed here and there, the way the films have all been weaved together is actually pretty clever. Legacy of the Dark Knight also does a really good job of managing to blend the light-hearted slapstick humour the LEGO games are known for with the more dramatic and grounded nature of some of the more modern Batman interpretations.
Coney?
Uh-oh.
What do we do? Simple. Blend in. This is how Batman begins. To dance.
There is a risk of tonal dissonance, but TT Games are well versed in reinterpreting source material into this style. Though some jokes didn't really land for me, that's just personal preference. The humour is aimed at children after all, and the overall writing remains as charming as ever, bolstered by some fantastic performances. A standout, as you may have expected, is Matt Berry as Bane, whose pronunciation and delivery style is a perfect fit for LEGO's style.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by... Ah! Who put that there? I could have really hurt myself.
I want more Matt Berry's Bane. There wasn't enough of him here. Hell, just give me more Matt Berry in general. There is a villain-themed DLC in the Mayhem collection due to release September 18th, alongside the Switch 2's release. I purchased the deluxe edition, which does include the DLC, so I'll likely give it a play. As it's set to expand the character roster with at least the Joker and Harley Quinn, I do hope there will at least be more opportunities to spend time with villains like Bane, even if they aren't playable characters. Much like the films were given various levels of attention, the villains themselves were given the same, with some not even getting proper boss fights, and many minor villains who could have been the focus of interesting minor stories in the open world only being alluded to through collectibles or seen in a time skip montage. Given the lack of story content outside of the main campaign, I can't help but wonder if this content has intentionally been withheld from the base game in order to be sold as additional DLC content. The up and down pacing of some parts of the game are sections that could have been ripe for additional content. Joker's escape from Arkham to explain his reappearance between Batman 89's campaign section and the Dark Knight's campaign section could easily have spawned the escape-themed DLC. Lastly, the elephant in the room is some of the more egregious paid cosmetic elements. The deluxe edition contains a couple of additional themed packs and access to the DLC, which is fine, but some additional skins are only available by purchasing the associated LEGO sets. The skins are kind of bad, just being completely gold, and personally I don't see the appeal of them, but I really can't be okay with them being locked behind physical LEGO sets. There are 4 sets available in total, which will unlock a golden Batman suit and 3 golden Batmobiles, and will set you back £145 or $170 US. That's over double the cost of the game itself. Honestly, if you don't want to see this kind of thing in future LEGO games, please do not buy this. This is insane. LEGO is already incredibly expensive as a hobby, and wasting your money on this will only encourage additional cosmetic content from future LEGO games to be carved off for additional real-world purchases. Just don't do it. Okay, conclusion time. Legacy of the Dark Knight truly is a new paradigm for LEGO games. It takes the formula in a new direction, redefining how LEGO games are played with a stronger focus on capturing the essence of a franchise than ever before. That reverence for what has come before, more so than just being fans of the game, has leapt forward the capacity of LEGO games to retell the story of franchises in exciting ways and refreshed core gameplay through the combat thanks to Rocksteady's influence. However, there is still a lot of work to do. Legacy of the Dark Knight represents a huge step in the right direction for LEGO, but the reliance on tied gameplay in the collectibles grind, while improved, is still just padding, and stands out against the improvements made to combat and exploration. But where does the series go next? There certainly needs to be new blood in the franchises that get the LEGO treatment, and TT Games needs to consider how the character roster can continue to be improved to better find the balance of not overly bloating with endless minor characters, while also providing included characters with some more variety and a greater sense of identity through gameplay. Should you play LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight? Absolutely. It's not the final form of LEGO games, there's still work to go, but it is truly a love letter to Batman media and a wonderful experience. I really did enjoy my time with Legacy of the Dark Knight and continue to go back to chip away at the remaining collectibles. I've spoken quite a lot at this point, so I will leave it there. If you made it this far in the video, thank you kindly for watching, it is greatly appreciated. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and maybe subscribe. If you've played Legacy of the Dark Knight, let me know in the comments below. Did you enjoy it? Would you recommend it? What franchise do you think should get the LEGO treatment next? Personally, I would love to see TT Games tackle Doctor Who. I think it's a great fit for the LEGO formula, and the level packs for LEGO Dimensions worked as a great proof of concept.